I'll start my discussion about who my father was with the first poem I wrote about my childhood. When I shared this poem with Dad, it opened the door to many conversations that led to healing for both of us. This poem, Parkway Auto Parts, was the poem I first wrote in a sequence chronicling my childhood. It was also one of the lead poems in my first book, Visions on Alligator Alley. Parkway Auto Parts. I remember the machine shop where you rebuilt transmissions and carburetors, inventory of fan belt boxes and Quaker State oil, centerfolds and bikini girls covering grease-stained handprints and holes, and the corner where I stacked Budweiser cans to make homes and tunnels for my spark plug people. I remember the gumball machine outside the parts room filled with peanut M&Ms, a water cooler by Bill's office door, and how I drank the summer of '87 over and over from a paper cone cup just to watch the bubbles fart to the surface. That was the year I started kindergarten, and you called Mom and nothing, and you found a job the next day. I remember lying next to you on a creeper under a red '69 GTO, and you telling me that the oil was the lifeline of the vehicle. And I wondered then about the harsh words you doled out when cheap American brew flowed through your veins. You'd forgotten how many beers you could handle in an hour, or the handprint you left next to the poster when you propped yourself up after chugging all those cans. You'd forgotten your car passion, or how you could fix anything except Mom. I don't know what my lifeline is, but I am the only girl I know who could change my own brake pads or set my own rocker arms. Growing up with Dad wasn't easy. He was an advocate for what was just, or more so, a fighter for what he thought was just. Unfortunately, much of his parenting skills came from the upbringing he had from his own father. Those childhood traumas carried over into adulthood. He packed in all those PTSD the job as a firefighter carried, on top of someone who had the most giving heart, the willingness to make sure his daughter was well educated, fed, able to drive, was safe and happy. My father had very little for himself and of himself. He did this for strangers. He did this for customers and friends. He did this for family. He also did this for me. My father was a workaholic, and he did it because he knew nothing else, no other lifestyle. He'd work himself so hard that when he was able to sit down in his favorite recliner in the den, he'd pass out cold asleep. However, in reflecting now, my father was the way he was because he was so unsure of himself. He wanted to be accepted and loved and felt so rejected and unloved in his youth. He found his brothers within the fire department, was able to fix someone's car when no one else was able to resolve the problem, and he was able to bestow wisdom onto me. He loved sitting and sharing stories or watching a movie he thought was great. Most were comedies or reruns of the first years of Saturday Night Live, and then there were a few bizarre ones like The Blob and Soylent Green. But spending time with Dad meant a good laugh and the opportunity to be, as he called it, educated on life's valuable lessons. The life lessons he taught me ensured I grew into an independent woman, relying on no man. And I think my husband Walter can confirm that's pretty darn true today. When I was 15, I began the McDermott household ceremonial process of learning how to drive. It began with having to memorize every exit on the I-95 from the Martin County, Palm Beach County line to where it becomes US 1 in Brickell, as well as having to memorize every single major road from A1A West to the Everglades. My sense of direction is unmatched, as is my ability to parallel park. Do you remember the episode from the Brady Bunch where Marcia and Greg had a competition and a series of driving tests? One challenge was to park without knocking an egg off a traffic cone. Well, Dad borrowed a few of those orange traffic codes from the department and had me learn to parallel park in Dad's E150 Econoline 1-ton work van. And yes, I was not allowed to knock over the egg off the cone. Several scrambled eggs later, and I have since experienced no embarrassments today parking street side of the promenade in Coconut Creek. As a mechanic, Dad fixed many vehicles: tractors, semis, Porsches, station wagons, airboats, golf carts, and even a 1942 Mack fire engine, which you will see at the reception at the Benevolent Hall later. And I had to learn how to drive every single one before I was allowed to sit for my driver's test. I remember on an early release day in high school, I was home watching Ricky Lake or reruns of Saved by the Bell, and Dad threw open the door and ordered me outside. When I came out front, the old fire truck was sitting in the swale. Dad was leaning over the steering column, unscrewing the suicide bar that helped you make the turns because I had no power steering. That day, I learned on the old fire truck how to drive a manual engine. And when I was turning the corner without the power steering, I completely took out Mrs. McGarvey's front yard. That day, I not only learned how to drive a stick, but that evening, I learned how to replant an entire flower bed. I had to be able to change my own oil. I had to name all the parts of the engine under the hood. I had studied harder than I did for my 10th grade anatomy test. I was the only girl I knew who could change a flat in under 3 minutes using a scissor jack. I also know what makes a slant 6 engine better than a straight 6. A week after I got my driver's license, I had to ride out to the body shop on Atlantic Boulevard to help my dad pick up a 1991 Honda CRX. It had a manual engine. My father asked me if I knew the way home down I-95, threw the Honda's keys at me, and said, "Now you go figure out how to drive a stick, and I'll meet you at the house." And I did. And that car then became my first car. The summer before my sophomore year at Florida State University, Dad requested I come home for the term's break. His reasoning? Dad bought me a 1995 yellow Mustang 5.0 Mustang convertible. Our project together, rebuild the engine. And we did. My little hands set the rocker arms, bored the cylinders, and refurbished the timing components. We made it into a race car. As an adult, I asked my dad why he subjected me to these car-filled rites of passage, filling my head with all this useless knowledge that would never get me far with Alex Trebek on Jeopardy. And he told me something very simple. I never want you to be stuck. I need you not relying on anyone but yourself to get through this life. What my father did for me is something I can only hope I can instill into my own daughters, which is that he made me into a very strong, self-reliant woman. My father, whose television idol was Archie Bunker, was actually more like the meathead. My dad was quick to drop a grossly misogynistic joke like Archie, while at the same time he served as the first feminist in my life. It was a strange dichotomy in our household, but true all the same. He empowered me to do anything and be anything, pushing me to never give in to gender stereotypes. I grew up at a fire station. I came of age in a machine shop. He made me spark plug people to play with. I never shied from getting my cuticles dirty. But as I came into adulthood and we talked, we worked on healing, and we did heal. My father was my biggest cheerleader. He understood my struggles in school. He acknowledged his own shortcomings and insecurities. Dad was the product of his upbringing. He desired more than anything to love and to be loved, but sometimes it often came out all wrong. My father was always proud of me. Dad was the first one I told when I wanted to become a professional poet. He, of course, asked me if it was something like underwater basket weaving. But then he went out and bought himself a t-shirt that read, "My daughter and my money go to Florida State." And he wore it so proudly. He encouraged me to write. He tried hard to learn my art and asked for books. And when I published my own in 2015, I don't think he could have been prouder, despite knowing that the heavy topics in the book came from my own personal story. Education was very important to Dad. He always said that knowledge was one thing that people can't take away from you. He beamed when I became a tenured professor at his alma mater, Broward College. He went to Broward Community College for all of his fire and medic training. And when I was named for a second time by the institution as an endowed teaching chair in 2022, the first thing I did was go by and see Dad in his memory care facility. After I explained the award, he read the plaque and then said, "Congratulations, honey." And then after a long pause, "I'm proud of you." And then, "I love you." After a long pause for thought, he then swiftly went back to eating his vegetable soup and plated turkey supper for lunch. It's these moments of reassurance throughout my life that made all parties know we were doing all right. Writing comes very easy to me, but writing this eulogy has been hard. I write poetry daily and sometimes several poems a day, but trying to write for Dad an elegy, which is a type of poem that expresses sorrow or lamentation for someone who has died, is something I still haven't been able to do. Although my dad has been gone for well over a decade due to his disease, I don't know if I'll ever be able to say goodbye. I simply don't want to. Dad's stories, my memories, my father is still alive, well within me, and with all of us. So I'll leave you with this one last story. When I was in grad school pursuing my Master's of Fine Arts degree at FIU, my poetry workshop professor gave me the assignment to write an abecedarian poem. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's an ABC poem, where the first line starts with an A, the next one a B, and the next one a C, and then so on. I decided to write full stanzas in alliteration, or the overuse of the same letter sound. And for the topic, I chose to focus on a fictional character talking about her first car. And then I called Dad. Together, we collaborated on this poem, Dad helping me with car terms and functions, and I worked on the poetics. Together, we had some belly laughs. At the reception at the firehouse, I will share this poem, and we will have an area for anyone who'd like to share their own memories of Dad. It's these memories of reassurance through life that made all parties know we're doing all right, and I thank Dad for that. Dad took his victory lap. He is now in a place where the lawn is always mowed, the bushes are always trimmed, the oil is always changed, and the car is washed and gassed. The food is Italian. The sweet tea is freshly brewed. No trips to Home Depot anymore. There's unlimited boxes of Entenmann sweets, and the Christmas lights are big bulbed with one randomly blinking. And Daddy's watching NASCAR on TV with his feet up in his favorite recliner, remembering how much his family and friends appreciate him. And Dad, I'll be okay. I'm not stuck. I want you to know that I'll make it the rest of my life, taking this drive on my own. Thank you.